over the weekend, we were suggesting that Bitcoin was likely to remain in this lower trading block here as it does consolidate and once again retest the lows. And here Bitcoin is retesting the lows at about 110. And the question of the day is everything over, and what likely happens next, and what sort of an environment should we really be expecting to occur over the next, I would imagine, a couple months. So that is going to be the big focus of today. Of course, we will go into the shorter term timeframes near the end as well. But we'll start it off as always with some revisiting of the daily price action statistics. And Tuesday is literally a coin flips probability and whether it's likely to close positively or negatively, with a 50-50 chance to close positively or negatively since this bull market began in 2023. As always, though, we care most about the average returns on the gaining and losing side, which is 2% and 1.75% respectively. And as we can see, Bitcoin has already tested the bottom side of this average returns range lows that was effectively at 113.250. The first test to there in the early morning hours was indeed a little bit of a bounce. So we have seen that play out yet again. But of course, it is, as always, very, 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 very important to remember that the second test to that average return range, which in this case was the bottom boundary, is significantly less likely to produce, in this case, a bit of a bounce. And as you can see, Bitcoin is hanging significantly below 113 or so, actually about $3,000 below that pivot. So ultimately, what does that imply? It implies that if we do see Bitcoin close down below here, I really would be looking for another leg to the downside. We'll talk about what that likely looks like as well as targets. But of course, it's a long day left to go. And if Bitcoin does, for some reason, pop back above 113, I'd say that we're still kind of, in the same vicinity, in the same area. Again, we've seen this play out so many damn times. I'll just call it out yet again for the historical price action statistics indicator. Gotten so many questions about this. Really, really awesome. If you're a lower term time frame scalper, I think it's just so damn important to pay attention to these because it does offer a very, very valid edge to be scalping for those more short-term minded people, which is completely fine, by the way. You can find this and try it out for free in the Caretakers Indicator Suite in the description below for Teachable. All right, sweet. So now let's get into, I think, something that we've spoken about on this channel in the past. I'm pretty sure other channels have probably, spoken about this as well, but I just wanted to revisit it, kind of answering the question, is there a good case for the market cycle being over for Bitcoin? Well, if you are of the 4-year cycle persuasion, in fact, I mean, there certainly are some things. I'm of the opinion that is not, at least for me, it's not confirmed as of yet. Although, yes, I do think that there's downside. I do think Bitcoin's going to play out some sideways and down here. But ultimately, if we go through the past couple market cycles, there is something really strange that has been going on in the sense that the amount of days from the prior market cycle low to the market cycle top that follows that has been 1064, quite literally on the dot for the 2017 cycle and also the 2021 cycle. Both of them taking literally 1064 on the fucking dot right there. Now, I should add that there is some complexity to this. What I'm trying to say is not that fucking simple because, if you do go to the index, you actually will notice that the low for 2015 cycle was significantly later. It's in August actually compared to what we're seeing here on Bitstamp for January 2015 2015 being the low of that cycle. But hey, if we do run with this one, yeah, it has been consistent for the past couple cycles. And as of right now, for our current cycle since the low, which was in November of 2022, we are actually on day number about 1057. So next week would put us right at that same 1064 number. Of course, I have a very hard time seeing Bitcoin make a new high between this week and next week. I think this is a corrective period for Bitcoin. Ultimately, I think this is a good thing, to be honest with you. But, it looks like that relationship is going to be destroyed either way. Because either Bitcoin topped out a little bit earlier or perhaps it happens a little bit later. But either which way, that very unlikely going to hold because, I mean, if you are going to be taking it to the dot, then, well, currently we have seen the all-time high on Bitcoin on day number 1050 rather than day 1064. Small difference right there, 2 weeks earlier. But hey, if you are going to be going by the book on this one, I think that does matter. And it also does kind of call into question this relationship over time. Anyways, I do want to also state that while I do think Bitcoin is corrective here and likely has some downside, I don't really look at this as a likely mega macro high that's going to last for, 4 years, to be honest with you. I just don't see the things that I'm generally looking for on a major high like that, particularly with volatility, which right now is very, very low. We generally expect volatility to be, very high, during major all-time highs for Bitcoin especially, and we just haven't seen that. So moving on from there, and to address the question from before, I do think that there is a greater potential for more of a correction here here, at least sideways and down, with another try probably around last Friday's low. If you recall this setup over here, the 4-day time frame for EMA versus 21 EMA, getting that correction down to the green 55, that actually did indeed occur last Friday. So it looks like the wish was fulfilled. I understand that, again, many people are not looking at that as a wish. I understand. Look, I'm not trying. I'm not taking happiness in anyone losing money or anything like that. Absolutely not. But my point is that yes, this setup in fact actually did play out. It always happens in a way that you don't expect, but hey, that's the way the fucking cookie crumbles now, isn't it? Anyways, so if you are not familiar with this setup, we've just been using it for directional analysis on YouTube. It is not a good trading setup or anything like this. It is, however, really, really good for just getting biases on direction. And throughout the past 8 years here, we have seen anytime that those two moving averages cross, a minimum correction down to the green moving average is initiated generally relatively quickly, except for this iteration over here. This one took actually a lot longer than all of the prior ones over the past 8 years, but still, this one did play out. Anyways, the reason why I'm once again highlighting it right here is because we are likely going to see this one fire off actually again. And yes, you can get multiple firing off in a row, and they do typically play out in that same fashion, right after the other as well. Like that actually is valid, is what we've seen in the past. And so assuming Bitcoin is really anywhere below 113,500 US dollars by tomorrow night's closure, that being Wednesday's closure, we will see this fire off again. And that means that that green moving average once again becomes a minimum corrective target. Might not happen on the exact next period, but whether it takes one period, whether it takes 5 periods, I don't fucking know, but I would generally be looking for yet another test down to this green moving average, which right now is just below 107. Again, as a minimum, you can definitely see Bitcoin tip, lower than that number. But again, this is inevitable as long as Bitcoin is below 113,500 US dollars. That's what I'm trying to say. That's the number, and the time frame to be expecting that is tomorrow. If tomorrow night's closure is below that number, we are extremely likely to see a correction down around here. Again, using the Quant Prime service to backtest this one, it has passed with flying colors over the past 8 years. Every time that cross happens, we do get that correction. We do get that correction, and it generally brings price action down. So this setup, however, can bleed into the 5-day time frame, which obviously is going to be a lot more powerful, being that it is a higher term time frame. And this one is not closing tomorrow night. It's going to be closing in 3 days from now, 3.5 days actually. So I believe that would be Friday's closure. Might be Friday's closure. My mental bandwidth is shortening right now. But as you can see, the two moving averages of question, the red and the yellow moving averages, are very, 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 very close to twisting and turning under, having a cross under in this case as well, with the red going below the yellow. Now, if Bitcoin is basically here or lower, I imagine that you will see that naturally happen. We can actually check out the exact number that would be needed to force that cross. Technically speaking, it would be, according to Caretaker's moving average crossover reads right here, it would actually require a closure below 106,500 on this next period. But I imagine even if Bitcoin's here or a little bit lower, it'll draw it so close that the next period will basically have them already kind of doing it, and then from there you probably get that that move within the period that follows that one. Anyways, the reason why I call this one out is because the 55 EMA on the 5-day time frame is naturally going to be a lot lower than the 4-day time frame, and that is at about 104. So we can kind of come up with an area of interest between about 107, which is about last Friday's low, and about 104. And again, that would be a minimum corrective target. But this one not confirmed as of yet. I think that it very likely will be confirmed personally, especially if tomorrow is below the 113.5 number that we spoke about, because that does very likely initiate a correction down to 107. So you can see kind of how the dominoes fall here and how those targets could extrapolate. And again, that would be a minimum target, 104. So generally, I think Bitcoin could come anywhere between there in very high 90s on a wick, and then maybe it settles, above that 55 EMA. Something like that could be okay. But anyways, moving on from there, I do want to acknowledge that this does play quite well and hand in hand with the weekly HPDR here as well. We did see last week Bitcoin had a chance to get above the median. It was rejected by Friday's closure, obviously. And once again, we are using this week on the open to sell off from the test of that median here on the HPDR. And what do you know? The bottom side of that 38.2 level is where? About 101, 102 and change. So what am I kind of drawing from that as a conclusion? Well, again, if Bitcoin, does experience those crosses, we're very likely looking at very low 100s. We see a lot of confluence around that region. And I think that it could dip, even a little bit lower than that as well. And that, honestly, in my opinion, would be fine. I'm actually not necessarily of the opinion just yet that the market cycle is over. I think that there is potential for a higher term time frame, higher low, but naturally, I do think that this is going to take a long time to resolve itself. And personally, I do think that this is a good thing. So I've been stating over the past week or two now that, in my opinion, and you are free to disagree with it would be my ultimate wish that Bitcoin does not go parabolic in the short term here in October, and instead spend some time going sideways and setting in yet another base. Why is that? Because that has been consistent with this cycle's sort of, flavor, in that we see these nice sideways ranges lasting, 4 to 7 months, and then these big stair step ups. And if we can do that yet again over here, if Bitcoin can do that yet again over here, that to me would indicate that this thing is maturing and is becoming more and more like a traditional market ETF, which is not going to really be having these major mega spikes to the upside, and also not major mega spikes to the downside as well. Now, a lot remains to be seen on this. This is just a potential as of right now, because if Bitcoin is going to dump off and is going to play out the 4-year cycle and is going to have, a mega massive retrace, well, I guess this is as good a place as any, particularly with that timing and whatnot. And now that I recognize it here on the weekly time frame, we do have multiple drives of bearish divergence. That is very much present. So that is in the cards. But still, personally, I'd like to see at least a weekly downtrend before I start to entertain that possibility. And as of right now, we do not have a weekly downtrend. In fact, Bitcoin won't even have the potential for a downtrend until it's below about 107 on a closing basis. That's when we take out that last prior trending low from September, or early September, I should say. So, still a lot needs to be done. But yeah, it's always potential, obviously. Personally, I still look at a consolidation at these higher levels as generally a good thing. But, be aware that things can and will change around fast if they do. So other than that, that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. Generally a sideways and downside corrective period to remain. To the upside, if Bitcoin does get some bounces, I think, you're more or less range bound below about 119. So hopefully Bitcoin holds between about 119 to the upside versus about, let's call it 95 to the downside for the next month or two. And that to me would be a really good signal that Bitcoin does make another try to the upside in a more sustainable way, probably very, very end of this year or early in 2026. So yeah, anyways, let's go over some lower term time frame stuff as well. I know people love that, and we can go back to the quantum wave bands over here. I just want to call out that the quantum wave bands, is, in my opinion, really fucking good for newer people to at least reference, not necessarily that you have to trade it, but at least reference it, because it gives you an idea of what a working strategy looks like. And despite this pretty nasty price action over here, we do see that this thing continues to just grind up into the right on the equity curve, despite taking, some pretty nasty losses along the way. If you do have a nice positive edge in your favor over time, that adds up, and it's just adherence to that strategy that will produce in my opinion, very, very good results over time. Again, you can try this out for free for 7 days. We've seen a lot of people who just get the 7-day free trial and then they just, jump on it after that, because either they've made enough money to actually, pay for it, or, some people just like pay for it outright and do the lifetime, which is pretty cool actually to see. At the same time, I would say just for beginners, it's really good to have sort of like training wheels alongside of you to kind of keep you on track. And what's most important about this is that it just keeps you from getting fucking wrecked. Now, obviously, if you use super high leverage, you're going to get wrecked probably with a strategy like this, and certainly with any other strategy that you may be, considering, because you just can't survive shit, especially when you get an event like Friday. But on Friday's event, while this thing did take a big loss, it was not a catastrophic loss as it could have been, which I think a lot of people experienced. Probably cut that loss off, around about 30%, in which case, many people experienced like the whole 100% here from basically the highs all the way to the lows. Now, I do want to add that I am applying one of the optimizations to this quantum wave band strategy for the people who have been asking. All I'm doing here is I'm putting in the trailing stop condition and enabling that. So when you do something like that, it will keep you safe from these sort of moves. I think that is kind of like a good sort of trade-off between keeping that, that equity curve nice and smooth, and also, it's not going to be maximizing your P&L, but it is going to be, it is going to be, in my opinion, still acceptable for something like this. Ultimately, Comes down to you and how you want to play it out. You don't have to play it out exactly like this, but it can give you at least objectively strong entries and exits based upon statistics that give you an idea as to, is this even a good time to be in? So again, if you're flying blind, then I think that's a good, good sort of compass to kind of have by your side. Other than that, what else do we want to talk about on the lower term time frames? Go back on over here. See what's going on in the 4-hour time frame. Didn't even prepare this, but 4-hour time frame, are we going to get a short-term bounce off of the retest of Saturday's low or Sunday's low? Probably yes. Very, very common stuff. Does that bounce bring you back above, that last lower high, which was 116? That would be the major question here. I don't think that it will personally. I do think that that's going to start to become a bit of a range high. But hey, if Bitcoin can trade back above there, then, well, I think you're going to see somewhere around 119 to maybe even 120. And then this market starts to look actually like it might do something crazy, which, again, personally, I hope that doesn't happen. I want to see a long consolidation here. Anyways, hidden bearish divergence from yesterday's video already played out on the 4-hour time frame. All right, so we're good there. So, if this thing bounced back up to like 113.5, 114 intraday, again, it doesn't really change anything for the higher term timeframes, but you can easily get a bounce off of a retest of a major low like this. So that is certainly in the cards, and I would even say somewhat or probably likely. In fact, there should be some bullish divergence building. Actually, sorry, there's not going to be bullish divergence building because it did not make new lows just yet. But we do see some extremes on volatility. So I do look at that. I see some pretty extreme levels here on volatility. I don't think that Bitcoin's going to just like slide down and make new lows significantly from where you're at right here compared to those Friday lows just yet. I think you get a bit of a bounce attempt first, and then if it's going to slink on down, it probably happens, I don't know, later this week / early next week, something like this. Timing always very, very difficult with these things, but that's intuitively what I'd be thinking right here. I do want to call out though that all these major moving averages on a 4-hour time frame are switching into a bearish posturing. You can see the 200 simple right here. The white moving average is governing basically the high of yesterday. You can see multiple rejections around that region. So I do look at that as very, 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 very significant. You can also see the price action pivots indicator is highlighting this as a big area of interest to be aware of. That is effectively your last trending lower high. So as long as you're below there, it is a downtrend. It is a downtrend on these lower term time frames, and thus if we do get a bounce, have to be looking for at least a lower high, or that would be the bias from the way that I look at things. Anyways, other than that, I think it's a good place for me to leave off on this video. We'll be back on tomorrow with another live stream analysis. I've been really loving the live streams recently. It's so much fucking fun, man. The community here is the best. Seriously, it really is the best. I absolutely love these live stream times, and I'm very much looking forward to it. We'll be back on for a live stream tomorrow, Wednesday, and then back with another regular video on Thursday following it. Other than that, wishing you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully next time.